Hi, my name is Jill Berry. I'm CEO and co-founder of Adatree, a B2B technology platform dealing with regulated data sharing. You're listening to Enabling the World with Tech with Prashant Gami.
Thank you. Welcome, Jill, to our podcast. We looked at Adatree and your journey before Adatree, and it looks amazing. So tell us more about how did you get here? Like what inspired you to actually found a company and deal with that? Because I saw that you call yourself an accidental entrepreneur. So what is it? What is the whole journey about?
Yeah, so I'm always been a product developer by trade, developing banking products, payment products in smaller organizations. So that means I just get my hands dirty with everything in the end-to-end process, really. I've been lucky enough that since 2015, I've helped build 2 new fully licensed banks in Australia. So it's pretty rare here.
Right.
And yeah, I definitely didn't plan on starting a company, despite actually studying on strategy and entrepreneurship at Sydney Uni. So the reason that I really started Adatree was that my co-founder and I, Shane, we were working on starting a bank, but this new legislation came out called the Consumer Data Right, giving consumers full rights over their data about who holds it, what companies do with it, whether you have a right to deletion, some really big, interesting game changers for consumer and data. And while we worked in financial services, there were so many wide-ranging impacts outside of financial services as well, just how to lead better consumer outcomes economy-wide. So we're like, it was really similar to building a bank for what skills were needed. We are passionate about the potential outcomes for Australians. There's no solution in the market, and we're just a team that works really well together. So we decided to actually quit and found Adatree.
That's great. So how big is the Adatree team? Like, where did you start and how big is the team now?
Yeah, so there's actually 12 people. We're growing, and but yeah, so we have way more customers honestly than I thought we were going to have in 2021. So it's been a really big year for us, actually.
That's good. It is in demand, and you are right. So like when it comes to AI, ethics and consumer rights have such a big place, and it is often the ignored subject. So companies like Adatree really add value to that customer advocacy and ethics, I guess. So with the Adatree, how is your journey been? Like, what were the struggles that you had to go through? And this basically, how did you end up where you are today? What was this journey like?
Yeah, it's been a really long journey, but we've had a whole lot of help along the way. So I think that some of the hard parts of starting a regulated B2B company was so much about just even getting started, whether it's the brand proposition, like that's ultimately what I'm good at with product development. But there's the harder things that you probably wouldn't face nearly as much in a B2C startup. But B2B, instantly you have to have enterprise grade policies, insurances, structures, and even finding some early adopters for your technology. So I think that just like so many companies, you can have a wonderful solution, but if it doesn't really solve a problem, or if you don't actually acquire customers, then it doesn't work out. So that's been a big challenge for us from the beginning. But we were really, I hate using the word lucky, but I think that things really fell into place for us when about 4 months after we started, that's when we signed our first client.
That's great, actually. And how many rewrites did you have to do? So we often see on this podcast that people, when they go through the journey of scale up, founding, and then scale up, and when they go to the actual customers and they think that, okay, this would be cool and that feature will really add value. But when they actually start talking to the customer, a lot of those features change because what customer needs versus what you think customer needs is a different thing. So what happened in that regards for you?
So I always prescribe to like more modern product development methodology where you would never, it's terribly inefficient for time, cost, and effort if you decide to just build it and then try to give it to someone or try to sell it to someone, and they're like,
True.
oh, you know what, that actually doesn't solve my
Understand?
problem at all. So I think it's just doing a whole lot of interviews initially, having a
Yes.
lean business canvas, the customer value proposition canvas, really
True.
understanding those are some of the
Hmm.
tools in my toolkit I've just been using my whole career as well.
Understand?
And then essentially working, working with like even now, like our prospects, and just always having a hypothesis based roadmap about, well, what do we think is important? How would
Understand?
we prioritize it? But also, what is the market looking for right
True.
now? What are some of the barriers to entry, and how can we make it such a no-brainer to use us? And ultimately, we just want to solve problems for
Definitely.
companies as well. So when looking back on it,
Hmm.
we have we had our initial lean business canvas, and we look back on it every few months or so, and we kind of not that much has changed,
Okay, that's good.
honestly.
So,
But yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that brings me to the discussion, because um, customer data rights. Now everybody knows that the data rights are there, but as a product, what does it look like? What is a CDR as a product for Adatree? Like, is it more technological solution, or is it more regulatory solution? What actually involves in a project that you deliver?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So CDR, that in itself, it's not a technology, it's a regulatory data sharing regime.
Yes.
So it has about 267-ish pages of legislation and countless pages on essentially GitHub
Yes.
about technical standards. So it's ultimately, it's Adatree is a technology platform. We are the abstraction layer where we take all of those rules, standards, customer experience guidelines. They're difficult to meet, and they constantly change, and it gets harder and
Yes.
harder. So we are essentially an abstraction layer to that. We take care of meeting all the regulatory requirements to collect and analyze data,
Mhm.
and then we just give our clients an API. We stand it up in a single tenancy regulated environment that's been audited, and then get our customers ready in about 2 hours.
Wow.
So instead of building and maintaining it themselves,
True.
and
So
yeah, so that's where we sit
for
in.
people to understand, is it something like a payment gateway in a how do you say, in a logical way, like for payment as well, you have this whole PCI compliance, but not everybody is, like, equipped to do that themselves, so they go to payment gateways that are PCI compliant, and then they can use it. So is it something similar in the data space then?
Do you know what? It is actually similar to that, especially with like some new regulatory access models. So the same way
Mm-hmm.
that you would be like a representative of of a larger payments company. Um,
Understand?
yeah, so it is similar to that. I actually have like a way more basic analogy of it.
Yes. Yeah, sure, go for it.
Whereas like if you want to make a presentation, you just care about the presentation and what you're trying to achieve with it. You don't care about the technology of
True.
PowerPoint. So,
Yes.
so my analogy is essentially we're the PowerPoint of data sharing.
Okay.
All you care about is getting the data and doing something wonderful with it for your customers, and
Yes.
we take care of all the complexities of actually getting it.
Definitely. No, that makes perfect sense. So banking is a natural ground where all the sensitive data is. But apart from banking, what are the other use cases of CDR where you are expanding?
Yeah, so it's definitely not just banking at all, but we get asked this all the time about, well, what are the different use cases? And I
Yes.
think the best use cases definitely haven't been thought of yet, and it's economy wide across different industries. So I think that if I had to if I had to put it into two categories, it would just be smoother and smarter use cases. Now, the smoother
Understand?
use cases, are definitely just about like looking at things that you do right now and just saying, well, with like streamlined, secure, reliable, fast data sharing,
Yes.
how can you make it faster? So it's like pre-populated onboarding or account verification, transaction verification, income and expense verification, credit assessments,
Yes.
Reducing rejected payments. So these things were just ultimately should make
Yes.
should solve problems, but also they should just kind of complement existing solutions
Yes.
right now. And some of those can be, it doesn't have to be banking. So even things like energy, reducing rejected
Yes.
payments, and anything where you have set up a direct debit. There's often a fraud or operational overhead
True.
associated with it. How can we streamline that with CDR?
Yep.
And then the other category is about smarter use cases. So it's things that you couldn't have done before, but now with the CDR you can.
Yes.
So it might be switching as a service. It might be and like collecting, analyzing, and initiating payments all within a second or two. So there's interesting use cases to come up, and one of them that we've actually built was like the first non-financial services use case that we couldn't have actually ever built without CDR. It's something called COVID hotspot alert.
Yes.
And yeah, it's essentially a way that you can share your transactional data with Adatree because we're regulated. We have an API of the government COVID hotspots. And we basically tell you confidentially, and we legally can't even tell the government at all, just so you know if you have been somewhere that was actually a hotspot. So
understand.
So if you didn't check in, or even if you did check in, we'll tell you in seconds instead of days. So just like it's that idea of using real-time data for good.
Understand. And that's a perfect example of how technology blends into different use cases and solves the customer problem, which is great. And with the whole, it almost feels to me that with CDR, you're basically putting the trust where inherently the trust is not there. Like basically you are a trusted member who can handle data responsibly and legally, and then provide it to wide variety of applications, which is great. And that actually reminds me, because I hear a lot of this in a blockchain world as well, that it enables transaction between the non-trusted parties. So are you, like, from the technology perspective, what are your major technologies that you utilize? It is more AI, data lakes, big data, blockchain, anything?
You know what? We actually don't use any of that. Well, actually, we use machine learning for the matching of transactions, like the banking transactions, to a specific location.
Understand.
Turns out that was much harder than we anticipated, but so it was a good lockdown project for us. But yeah, I think that with our company, the only vendor that we actually use for technology is actually AWS, and we just access a whole lot of their components, but everything is actually proprietary to us. So I think that like this year has been kind of like really dipping our toe in the water of being data engineering instead of just software engineering.
Yes.
Especially as our roadmap really focuses on how do you leverage data, that will be much more important to us.
Understand.
It as well, but we're definitely team AWS for our tech stack.
Yeah, and I think most companies are a tech enabler. We do everything on AWS as well, but then we end up using like their blockchain components, their RPA components, and AI and so on to do the smartness with the not just the data but the systems that we have as well. So it's I think the technology is transforming, and it will be wonderful to see what comes on next. So that actually brings me to the future question. Where is Adatree heading? What do you want to do next in the company?
Yeah, definitely. So our roadmap is all about leveraging data, because we've made accessing data really easy.
Yes.
And removed barriers for companies of all sizes, use cases, and industries to participate in CDR. But the journey really never stops at, oh, I just want to access raw data. It's just about how can they transform it,
Yes.
in a way for their own use cases. So but yeah, so we're essentially building out like a menu of options about like how you can configure through an API, just different ways to leverage the data. So that's really important for us and our
Yes.
customers and a roadmap. I think that just generally within Australia, like the consumer data right, it starts with banking data, but it definitely doesn't end there. So it'll go to energy, goes to telco, and we have this vision 2.5 years ago. We're like, all right, let's be the CDR platform, but not just for Australia, but for globally.
Understand.
So you don't have to rebuild, you don't have to re-platform, and it takes actually really minimal time
Yes.
whenever there's new industry data sources, or we're also banking on other countries following, adopting the Australian technical standards.
Yes.
Ideally countries like Canada and New Zealand.
Yeah.
So when we want to, essentially expand into those countries, when they're
Mhm.
ready with the legislation, that it'll be really minimal localization for us.
Understand. And that brings me to the question, like when you have a global aspiration and you're growing too quickly, and with the current market, the skill shortage is real. Like people, it's hard to find good people and retain them. How is it going at Adatree?
Yeah, it's going really well. Just made a job offer today. Actually, I think that it's tough with with a big struggle for talent across so many companies. Like often you hear about software engineering, but even in product,
Yeah, everywhere. Yes.
yeah, especially of course you read in the news about the Great Resignation. But I think that there's just table stakes of like paying market wages, having an attractive ESOP program with startup tax incentives,
Yes.
but then also just having like those that company purpose, like especially for us, like we really care about data for good. We like
Hmm.
we know that of course we're for profit, we're a commercial entity, but it's also a question of, well, how can we encourage or really help or like do our best part for maybe like non-commercial use cases,
Understand.
and
Yeah.
have like a data for good launch pad with that. So it's still, it's
Hmm.
where values really meet technology as well. So I think that those type of things, and of course with flexibility, whether it's remote working, people can come into the office
Yep.
however they like. I think that those type of things like are um, that will just be people asking, or expecting those type of extra
Yes.
perks of flexibility, because it's not just a job. We spend too much time at it, so it has to just
True.
be part of something much bigger.
True. And that is so true. And do you have all your stuff in-house only always, or do you basically have elastic model of workforce or anything like that?
I know we have everyone in-house. Actually, the only people that we use externally are just legal and our PR agency.
Understand. And do you ever feel that you need to leverage or find more resources to scale up faster? Do you ever feel like you don't have enough people?
Well, of course, you always have more things to do than you
Yes.
have resources for. But I think it's just about being really thoughtful about how you expand, because
True.
so many leaders who haven't been close to technology don't really think about, well, you can't always just throw people at the problem.
True.
If I just
Yes.
tripled my engineering team, it would actually just come to a halt.
Yes.
I don't think it would work out very well at all, especially, and that's not even thinking about the cultural aspect as well. So
Yes.
so we have in our 2022 plans about how to grow, but also like how to really grow thoughtfully.
True.
So we're still being productive, especially while adding on new software engineers as well.
Yes.
So it's
Understand.
definitely an important thing. But could we triple the company right now? Well,
No.
I don't think it would go
Definitely.
very well. But
Yeah.
yes, we'll
So
have to be thoughtful about it.
it looks like you have a very clear understanding of how to not only found a company but also grow sustainably in a long term in a lean way, in a proper lean but agile way, so that it becomes like, purpose driven as well as successful in growing globally. Do you have any tips on how to do that?
What about about
Like,
growing?
what do you prioritize? How do you know that, okay, this is what we need to do next? Because a lot of people, they have a lot of wishes, but when it comes to priority, like, they fail to prioritize the first thing first, and it looks like you have solved that effectively. So what is your secret there?
I think that just like backing it up, I think it's
Yeah.
just I I like to use very rational and non-emotional ways of prioritizing. It's never top down, but
Mm,
it's bottom up. Like I think I've only made one call, just being like, nope, see, like making the
I
CEO
understand.
call, do that now. But things constantly change. And then
True.
we actually have like essentially like a ranking system where it's
Understand.
looking at, is this compliance related? Of course, we're regulated,
Yes,
that has to get prioritized.
of course.
But is this an enhancement only for existing customers? Will this, help bring on new customers? What's the unique value proposition? What's the cost to build? What's the cost to maintain for the business, for engineering?
True.
How does this relate to revenue, profitability? It's actually like this analysis of this. So
Yes.
it's never someone being like, oh, I like this feature, this one's next. No, you have to think about, of course, it's never a business case. We're too small for that.
Yes.
But you just have to think about, how does this add value to the business, to our existing customers, to
True.
our prospects, those type of things. And I generally like to prioritize about compliance always first, and then looking at just unique value proposition in market, and then just overall internal efficiencies. So for example,
Understand.
like we just finished this really big networking optimization project. So of course we would never really blog about that. That's not a new
Mhm.
feature, but that's an internal efficiency where we can cut our
Yes.
costs by around 70% every time that we deploy. So as soon as we automate, now we have incredible efficiencies.
True.
Now, then we're kind of set up for, for onboarding
Yes.
customers at scale, really.
No, that's amazing. So, in saying that, your team and the culture, your leadership team as well as your working team, how do you promote and maintain your culture and values that you have as a team?
So we talk about a whole lot of that. And so like one example was definitely hotspot alerts,
Hmm.
because we could have chosen any type of use case to,
True.
to to bring to market, but we really focus on like a data for good one. So
Yes.
I think that that's important. Ultimately, we have like a monthly team meeting, like kind of like product roadmaps and just like
Hmm.
general ideas, because things constantly change. We have to reprioritize.
Sure.
It's not wildly different, but things come up all the time. And even now, like this past few weeks, it's like we talked about, is every customer a good customer? Is every partner a good partner? And how do
Yes.
we all weigh into that?
Yes.
Because we're not just employees, but we are owners in the business, and we all have our own ethics and values. And how does that really relate to what we do?
Understand.
We talked about that type of stuff. And it's like, oh, would you decline certain customers, or even having some type of well, we ended up thinking
Hmm.
about like a data for good program, where like, well, instead of saying no to some customers, how can we say yes to other type of companies or use cases that maybe wouldn't get that leg up otherwise?
Hmm.
So I think it's just trying to be like really constructive and positive. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, ultimately, values, they just should never sit on a page. They should never just be written on a wall. But it's like, how do we actually promote this, and treat each other, um, with respect, and our clients and our regulators, and just always live that in our behavior. So I think it's because we actively talk about it. We like have a
Yes.
meeting where we'll be like, all right, what are we going to do about this?
Hmm. And I see that you have a very purpose driven and a very focused company. How does it blend with your personal goals and personal life journey? Is it something you always wanted to do?
Absolutely not. No, no, no. I like working hard. I like solving problems,
Hmm.
and just like kind of like critical thinking in general.
Yes.
Um, but 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 I never planned on being a CEO. But I think that overall, like being a product developer, you just kind of you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to
True.
just go from 0 to 1 and know that you're going to have a lot of uncertainty, that there will be tasks that you just don't know what to do. And it needs to
True.
be done tomorrow and perfectly
Yes.
or incredibly well. So I think that just like considering that's been my career, like going to CEO, it's kind of a natural progression for
Understand.
there. But I actively have to, like change my notifications. So Slack's not all encompassing, or, just naturally, if you get a message, you look at it, but I turn it off, or I turn off like my email notifications, or I'll go for a
Yes.
walk with my phone at home. So I think that those type of things, like I have to prioritize. So I'm just like fresh and ready to hit the
Understand. And you, I understand. Are you the technical co-founder, or you have a co-founder who is technical?
Yeah. So Shane is my technical co-founder. So I've worked with him at Tyro and at Volt.
All right. So I assume that since the day one, you had a technical co-founder in Adatree.
Yes.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And how do you rank the, the, how do you say, importance of a technical co-founder? Because a lot of the time we come across the companies who do not have technical co-founder, or they haven't thought of that until a later stage. And that is again, that creates a very different kind of how the business is found, or grown and all that, and particularly in a technology company. So would you actually found a company without having a technical co-founder to start with?
I think that considering what we do, it is, it's an API platform.
Yes.
Like I like, yeah. Other than doing the customer research and the, like the branding and the lead business canvas, like I wouldn't be able to build it myself, but I can
Yes.
definitely make product requirements. So I mean, there is no way that there's no way that I could have, founded Adatree. I would say without Shane, but we work incredibly well together. We worked at 2 companies together, and I imagine that, we just intend on working together
Of course.
in the future. I think that it would be very challenging without a technical co-founder, and the same way with him, that you'd probably be really challenging for him just being a technical founder and not
Yes.
having a product, or
True.
like the customer facing person.
Oh
So
yeah, definitely. Trust me, I'm a technical founder, and I can tell you, until I met the the another person who can take care of all the branding and sales and everything, it was just going in a all over directions. You do need complementary skills, and you do need a team. I totally agree with that. So what is the future apart from Adatree? Like, where are you growing? Are you currently focused on just growing this company, or are you growing other companies? Tell us about the future and dreams.
I have no other time for anything other than Adatree from like a corporate perspective as well. Like, no, we just have so many big goals for us in our companies, or within Adatree, and to keep our employees challenged and happy, and clients happy, and so I think that we have a lot going there. There's no way that I would be able to manage anything else.
Understand?
But yeah, it's a big challenge for me, but I'm so passionate about it, and yeah, it is fun.
That's good. That's great, actually. And with your global aspiration, how are you guys going? What is the timeline you're looking for? Are you targeting 2022 to go global?
So honestly, our platform would be ready, but we're just waiting on some legislation in other countries. So as soon as that gets the green light, then we can localize and kind of be there.
Understand?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we are absolutely keeping our eye on that.
Okay. Yeah, that seems great. And in terms of the technology talent, again, coming back to the technical pathway and how the product took and so on, how long did it take to actually create the first offering, a production level offering of Adatree?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. How long did it take to create the MVP, the first version that launched out? You told that in 4 months you signed the first client, and that would have been a major challenge, because I don't know if in 4 months your platform was completely ready.
It definitely wasn't, and absolutely not. So I think that we really started more of like with a proof of concept.
Mm-hmm.
And then going into an MVP. So I would say it would have taken realistically a year for an MVP, but we really didn't want to build an MVP. We wanted to build a factory. And I think that with the early investment,
Mm-hmm.
that's really worked out well for us, just because now we're pretty much as scalable as AWS, with our
That's good.
infrastructure, automation, and networking, really.
Yeah.
So
So
the
that,
last thing that anyone in our sales team would want, if we're like, no, we don't
no,
have
we can't do.
capacity to onboard someone, but we're like, no, that's great. Even things like, one of our unique advantages is that whenever there's a new data source, a new bank that comes online, instead of doing a manual integration to it, everything's automated. So we just get a Slack notification when something's done,
Okay.
because our engineers, they want to build applications. They want to solve more problems. They don't want to do manual,
of course,
integrations and testing. We just have automated all of that.
And do you have right now? Do you have? Yes, I understand the onboarding new tenant is automated. Do you have a continuous delivery as well? Like, do you have continuous releases going out all the time?
Oh, you mean like CI/CD?
Yes, CI/CD, like everybody does CI/CD, but then they have like, they only release once a year or something. How is your?
Absolutely. Constantly. And then, so we essentially, since we're regulated as well,
Mhm.
like we have our own platform, like accessing, like production real data.
Mhm.
That's always tested first, and then we have our customers' production platforms. Only after ours is tested, and then even their developer environment, that is a replica of production environment, except it's
Mhm.
attached to
Yes.
some mock data sources.
Mhm.
So that's why we really don't call it like a developer environment. We call it pre-production.
Yeah, pre-production. Yes.
Yeah. So if you say it, sandbox, we're like, oh, it's
Mhm.
not just test data, it's a full implementation, but
Mhm.
like it essentially, for your proof
Yes.
of concepts. But yeah, so we care. I think that's a really one of our big selling points.
Mhm.
Like, we test it in production with ourselves before it even goes to you in production, before it even goes to you,
True.
for your
Mhm.
pre-production environment.
Yep.
So it's, it was like the blessing and the curse of us being regulated ourselves, but it's much
Mhm.
better for just like our
Yeah,
technology platform, like fully
definitely.
being tested in prod.
Yeah. And one thing at X-Enabler, what we are promoting heavily is a continuous innovation. Like, your product need to be innovated continuously, not just maintained, but like, adding features, adding functionalities, adding more and more. What do you think about that? Is Adatree, like from what I have heard, it is a continuous innovation company, and how important, like how important do you think that is for a company?
Oh, it's super important, because there's there's international companies who are like, who said that they want to build what we have. If we just stopped right now, they would eventually catch up.
Yes.
But so we're just like, all right, this is what we're going to deliver, within the next year. These are the things we know about. These are the things we don't even, we have room for lots of things that we don't even know about as well.
Yeah.
So I think that it's absolutely everything to be continuously innovating, whether it's incremental or radical.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes perfect sense. So, uh, well, tell us more about all the awards. I see that you have, like, received number of awards through last year and the year before. So, what was that journey like?
Yeah, I think that it's actually been a fair amount of awards, honestly, more than I ever expected to receive, or even nominations or finalists. I think that it's really just a reflection of our strong vision, our ability to execute, and that's really everything. So, so well, like even now we just got best open banking solution
Mm-hmm.
at the fintech awards last week. Had number of leadership awards, nominations, for best partnership with a bank and fintech. For COVID hotspot alert, we got a global best use of open banking for
Yes.
good
Mhm.
award. So I like to think that it's a reflection of all of our achievements that it is a team.
Definitely, and it is a testament to all the hard work that you and your team have put. That's so true, and that's wonderful. Jill, thank you for coming to this podcast. We had a wonderful time talking with you and learning more about Adatree and the CDR. I don't think many people would even know about CDR before this. It's quite like people who come from banking, or I spent a fair amount of time in banking. I think we were at AMP at the same time, probably at some point. So it is great to know the technology and what you are doing with it. Thank you very much for that, and I hope we'll see you again soon on our podcast, enabling the world with tech.
Excellent. Thanks for having me,
Thank
Prashant.
you. Thank you. Bye.